much for having me. Thank all of you for coming. This is certainly an issue that affects our children and our grandchildren, so it's important that we get started and figure out how to actually address this. We can talk all day long, but I'm hoping tonight to give each of you who are interested some practical steps, what you can do at the local level. Everyone can do something. Not everybody can do everything, but we can all do something. So it's hard to stay motivated. I know, I don't know who got to watch Rand Paul's record-breaking filibuster, but when you see our president defending, as long as possible, the ability to launch drones into domestic airspace to either spy on or eliminate so-called threats without due process, it makes most of us a little uneasy and a little demotivated. But we have to stay engaged. Disengagement, fatigue, these are things that the other side counts on. Most Americans have kids, have lives, have jobs, and we tend to fall back on that. At some point, we get tired. With this, we cannot afford to, because these are the minds of future Americans, people that will be citizens, who will be voting. How many of you really are upset with the 18-year-olds in the last 2 election cycles? Okay? You want more of that? Because that's what Cscope's going to do. We'll churn out good little robots, not citizens. All right, so what I want to address first is, what's the biggest thing you can do? Assuming you've been following Cscope, lesson plans are one part of it. There's a mentality, there's a philosophy behind it as well. And when we get pulled aside into a tit-for-tat on lesson plans, which are important, we can lose the forest for the trees. The biggest part of this is the philosophy of the people who are creating Cscope, who are writing content, who are structuring content in classrooms. You heard Linda Darling-Hammond. I originally broke the story documenting Linda Darling-Hammond's connection to Bill Ayers. That name, it makes some people cringe, and others don't know who Bill Ayers is. So I always like to start by telling people, if you lived through the 60s, Bill Ayers is responsible for the deaths of several people in his botched attempt to bomb the Pentagon. He's a domestic terrorist who escaped conviction on technicalities. He's still dangerous, and he still has not renounced his violent activities in the 60s and 70s. He actually, in fact, said in the New York Times interview, right after 9/11, 2001, very sensitive guy, that he had no regrets. This man is linked to the woman who is mentioned throughout Cscope literature, who is mentioned as only one of 2 professional development team personnel for Cscope. Does that comfort anybody? They say that this program is created by teachers for teachers. That's a very McDonald's line. You know, I'm loving it, I guess. But this is not actually true, because we can't verify this. You remember Ronald Reagan once said, "Trust but verify." Well, we seem to be getting Cscope reps approaching us wanting our unconditional trust. Have they earned our trust? This is a nonprofit that was organized illegally under state law and was organized as such to evade public disclosure requirements. And they were caught in this, called to the mat, and virtually admitted this in live televised Senate hearings. This is no longer a secret. Why should we trust these people? They need to prove to us, citizens, parents, grandparents, why we should trust them with our children. Point 1. So what can you do? Your legal weapon as a parent or a grandparent or even a community actor is parental consent. No matter what has happened in America over the last 10 to 15 years, that's still on the books, folks. Parental consent requirements, parental access requirements. You have the right, under Texas law right now, to walk into the superintendent's office at your school district, whichever that may be, and tell the superintendent, I want you to print out all of the lesson plans for my child, my student, for the last year in every subject because I feel like reading them today. And they have to do it. And if they don't, or they say something evasive like, in an email would be great, because then it's in writing. If they say something like, well, Well, we can't get that to you right now. There will be some processing delays, and then we might be able to get it to you at some point in the near future. If you document that, and you don't get cooperation, and you don't ever get copies of those lesson plans, folks, you have a legal case, and you have standing because you're a parent, because your kid is being impacted by this stuff. And you can claim legal injury in a court of law because you were denied your rights under Texas Education Code. Now, does this sound a little like something Acorn would do? Yeah! We need to start thinking that way, people. Acorn does things well. Groups like Acorn do things well. They're effective. Look at who's in the Oval Office. Of course, he had a lot of help from machines made in Hugo Chavez's Venezuela. Rest in peace. But we are not thinking the right way about this. Now is not the time for us to resort and fall back on our pastimes and the things that make us comfortable and insulate us from what America is becoming and where it is going. Now's the time to actually start emulating the best qualities of our enemies, and that is energy, dedication, unyielding devotion to their end goal. If only that was freedom for the average American citizen and advancement, then we'd have a pretty darn good country right now. So let's not view our enemies so much as insurmountable foes, but as instructional guides. We need to start doing things that way. Number 2, Senator Campbell, Dan Patrick, the Senate hearings. These things did us good, but they did not actually result in change. In point of fact, Cscope just sent out a release this week that says, hell no, we won't go. I'm summarizing. Let me read you a paragraph here. For those of you who haven't seen the Senate hearings, one of the things that was decided and one of the conditions of Cscope's continued funding and operation in a joint agreement and release signed by Patrick, Barbara Cargill, State Board of Education Chair, and Wade Labai of Cscope, was that they would provide direct access, direct to parents for all this lesson content. Imagine your kid having a textbook and the school saying, sorry, we signed agreements with this third-party company. We can't give you the textbook. You'll just have to sue us. That's what's happening with this. The internet didn't change that dynamic. You still have the right to see content. Well, here's what Cscope says. This is after the hearing. This is after they've had their behind smack. They said this: why can't Cscope make all lessons available to the general public, quote unquote? Quote, there are several reasons. Don't tell us what those are. We believe that this would actually undercut teachers' ability to customize a lesson to best serve the students in their classrooms. Let me skip down a bit. The TESCCC strongly believes and supports local decision-making within school districts and insists that the member districts have the ability to release any Cscope content themselves, since it will more accurately blah, 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 blah. In other words, we're not going to give you anything. And we're going to let districts decide when and under what circumstances they feel like giving you something. Folks, that's unacceptable, and it's a violation of your rights, everyone's rights in this room, to know what's going on in their kid's classroom. I don't care if you're on the left. I don't care if you're a moderate. I don't care if you're on the right. I don't care which party you voted for in the last election. Everybody should want to know what the heck their kids are reading in classrooms. And that shouldn't be controversial. It should not be controversial for a parent to want to see, what did my kid read today? That used to be one of the first conversations I had with my parents when I got home. And that's what this issue is about for most average Americans and most Texans. Islam got the story running. Thank you, Ginger, for revealing that PowerPoint, for revealing all that information. Because, let's just face it, after 9/11, that word kind of gets people's attention. However, it's more than that. The basic foundation of this entire discussion that we're having right now for the last few months is access, accountability, transparency. These are buzzwords that Obama keeps using. How much of that have we seen so far? So here's where things stand with the Senate. They are introducing legislation, Tanya informed us, and it's being written. Unfortunately, Steve Toth's bill was shot down by ACONC and the Education Committee of the Texas House. Don't ask me why. The wheeling and dealing that goes on in both houses of the state legislature is substantial, and some of it's necessary to get things accomplished, a reality of the political world. But we do have the Senate bill, which Steve Toth told me on the phone in transit this evening is more effective, and he's happy about it. What does the Senate bill do? It gives the state of Texas immediate shutdown and defunding power over Cscope if they don't comply right now. Isn't that wonderful? So, folks, they've set themselves up for pretty much immediate defunding. They've backed themselves into a corner. They've said, no, we're not going to do it voluntarily, so I guess we're just going to have to make them